The development for all the primitive features is almost complete and will be releasing next month. A new industrial component, the hopper, is being set up. There's some changes and additions to the graphics options, and the new primitive game mode is getting set up, which adds a bunch of new convars for server admins. Starting off with the hopper, this is going to be a new industrial component similar to a storage adapter, but it will be able to suck up items within a 1.5 meter radius around it, but it will be blocked by things like walls. The development for this has just begun, so we can't test it in-game just yet, but it'll be interesting to see if it'll have the ability to suck items out of dead player bags, and also, in case you didn't know, there's keybinds to drop single and stacked items, which could be useful for the hopper. NVIDIA DLAA is being set up in the graphics quality options menu. DLAA is an AI anti-aliasing method for NVIDIA GPUs, which increases the image quality and reduces jagged edges. And from my limited understanding about this, DLAA is a new anti-aliasing method which is better for image quality, but DLSS in some cases could be better for performance. I have a pretty ridiculous computer, so I didn't notice a difference between any of the options for anti-aliasing, although I'm slowly going blind as time goes by, and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about in terms of anti-aliasing, but I'm using DLAA for the entirety of this video, and something does seem to feel a bit more high definition. Also, can you believe that this is Rust? Holy shit. You will need an NVIDIA RTX card to utilize this feature, and if you don't notice any difference between this and DLSS, you should probably use the max performance option on DLSS if you're trying to get the most FPS in game. Switching over to the aux2 staging branch, you'll notice that the graphics quality options are completely different. There's a preset option at the top to change everything at the same time, and a bunch of familiar settings under the rendering options, as well as some new ones. There's also some new texture options, which could be great for lower end PCs to gain some frames. There's also some new shadow settings, which from my experience is one of the best ways to gain frames besides reducing reflections and textures. And then all the way at the bottom, you'll find the LOD bias, which is the level of detail, and I turn this all the way up when I'm shooting my cinematics, and then above that is the regular mesh quality settings. And all these new settings, along with the other projects for performance that the developers are working on, such as indirect instancing, should increase frame rates over time as they roll out. And this is one of the most important things that Rust should be focusing on, because even on a high-end PC on an empty server on maximum quality settings, I struggle to reach my monitor's refresh rate at 144 frames. And if I'm on a server with huge bases, tons of people, it gets even lower. But you as a player should not think that this is some easy task that they can snap into reality. It is a very complex issue that's going to take a long time to solve, but I'm glad to see that there's some huge changes moving forward in this area. Moving on to some smaller changes and fixes from this past week, the maximum length of a telephone directory name has been increased from 20 to 30 characters, and this will now prevent it from getting cut off in the contacts list. It looks like in some rare cases the harbor was spawning in a way that the cargo ship would get too close to the fishing village and abduct the NPCs. This has now been fixed in the way that the harbors and fishing villages spawn near each other, and also the parenting volume of the cargo ship can no longer parent NPC mission providers. When activating NVGs, the Hollow site will change back to red for consistency now that there's the color accessibility options for it. And if you use MIDI controllers for keybinds, the convars will soon support the semicolon syntax to run multiple commands in a cycle. And if you're unfamiliar with what this is, I have a keybind where I hold Shift and press K, and then it runs a whole bunch of cinematic camera commands. And there's a bunch of other things that you can do this with, and this will be coming to MIDI controller convars soon. Perishable food items will now have a countdown timer to let you know when they'll spoil before needing to be refrigerated, and this is coming along with the Cooking 2.0 update at some point later this year. The siege weapons are getting their final touch-ups before release next month, and we finally get to take a look at the new Medieval Armor DLC. I'm assuming that this DLC will include the Medieval Barricade as well as the Medieval Door skin. The Knight Armor is a reskin of the Road Sign set, so we've got the helmet, the chest piece, and the kilt. And there's already a bunch of medieval themed skins on the Steam marketplace that you can mix and match with this set. And speaking of armor, there's a new mechanic being developed called Armor Slots, which allows you to equip items into pieces of armor, granting them bonus stats. Alongside their new ability to swim, horses will float to the surface if they die in the water, allowing you to loot any items that you might have stored on them. Another new feature for the horse rework is when you're going full speed and reverse, a sound effect will play and the horse will skid. Also, a new option has been added when pressing and holding E on a horse so that you can swap between a double and single saddle at any point. And a while back we saw something getting set up called eras, which we can now see is going to be for a primitive game mode. There's a whole bunch of admin commands that are being added specifically for this. And you can see that after we've set the era to primitive in the F1 items menu, a bunch of the weapons are now highlighted in red, meaning that they're completely disabled. And if we head over to the tech tree, you can see we're in a tier 2 workbench, but only the tier 1 is available, and the satchel has been removed from the tier 1 workbench to show for an example. And if we type find vendors in the F1 console, it shows us a list of new convars that we can use to disable vehicles from shops. There's also the new print server events, which shows you a list of the events on your server and details about them. New convars were also added to completely disable building grades. If you wanted somebody to, say, not be able to build in high quality metal, you would be able to disable that now. And a twig build cost multiplier convar was added, which I'm assuming allows you to change how much it costs to build in twig. When the primitive mode is enabled, horses will spawn at double the rate in the wild. An ability to override the crafting cost and crafting times of items based on the era was also added. A whole ton of convars have been added, and you can find all of them on rust_reboot/main/primitive_GM if you're a server owner and you want to take a deeper look at it for yourself. The convar that I found the most interesting was this one, where you can disable scientists specifically on junk piles. And that's all of the information I have so far on what the primitive game mode is going to be. It looks like there's going to be the era command with a predetermined set of settings that server admins can enable. We might even see a server from Face Punch that is a primitive game mode like hardcore and softcore, which looks like it's also going to be getting revamped at some point this year. But on top of that, the primitive mode is bringing a whole host of new convars for server admins to experiment and play around with, which is always a good thing to see.